Sean, welcome to the show. You have helped many service providers. What are the first things that most service providers need to change to start scaling?
Ooh, that's a great question, Elon. First of all, thank you for having me. Super pumped to be here with you and all of your fantastic community members. Look, when it comes to service providers, I think that, people get into a service-based business because they obviously want to serve. And so that therein lies the problem because as a business, there is an exchange of your time, your effort, your knowledge, and then ultimately that's put into service in exchange for the client's their commitment to there's a process to this and then financially. And what happens is as you get more and more successful, you get more and more people start looking for you and you start serving more and more people, which means you're making more and more money. But that means that you're taking up more and more of your time. And that is just the number one quandary for service providers is how do I still make and produce revenue, but not be stuck to my business? And so when it comes to scale, I mean, there's only a certain number of hours in a day. And so if I wanted to scale in the service world, that would mean necessarily that I would have to learn how to disattach myself from the actual service being provided. Otherwise, I'd never be able to leave my office. I'd be just handcuffed here into eternity.
Yeah, Sean, that's such a beautiful answer. I love the notion of people's idea of, okay, you need more of your time. If you have more of a growing business, it means you have to work 30 hours in your 24-hour day. I read on your Medium that you had a post on June 30th. It was called Growth Doesn't Happen in a Straight Line. You talk about the six P's. So you talk about people, prosperity, purpose, professional, plan, personal. Since we're talking about the idea of giving more of your time, explain the sentence, growth doesn't happen in a linear line.
Well, in a lot of ways, we could look at it. It depends kind of how we're looking at it. If we're talking just revenue, growth can be somewhat linear in the sense that it's kind of money in, money out. Hour in, hour out. If I work an hour and I charge $1,000 an hour, I make $1,000. And if I'm like, well, I'd like to grow, okay, well then work 8 hours and you'll make $8,000. However, you're way too young to remember when there were these little cars that as children we would play with and you would pull them back and then let them go and they would like take off and we thought that was like super cool. Looked like the car was kind of like, being propelled out there. In a lot of ways, growth is also like that. What I mean by it's not necessarily in a straight line is that, we go out and when we're attempting to grow our business, there are many, many times, and especially if we're entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, when we are investing in ourselves, investing in knowledge, investing in our business. And that can cause it to look or feel like it's going backwards. It's that pullback effect. And so, you have to understand that there's these sort of spurts. We go a little bit back and then we then get that, that propulsion forward. And then we pull back and we get that propulsion forward as we're looking for better and better bang for our buck, better and better return on investment inside of our business.
Love that. Sean and all my listeners, first of all, I want to say I had many of those cars that went
You
back
did?
and went
No
forward.
way.
But I think this is an amazing principle. It's a great metaphor. As far as you're talking about, sometimes you have to go back in order to accelerate. For me, I'm 21 years old. I'm young. I'm starting this podcast, so it's hard to get a return on my investment because I love talking to people, first of all, but it's not like I'm sponsored, not like I'm getting all these crazy money deals, right? So, what are some telltale signs for people that might have, right now trying to be learning and are in the stage where they're going back? What are some telltale signs that eventually they're on the right track and they're going to accelerate?
Wow, that is a fantastic question. First of all, let me start by saying, and I really love how open you are. You have on your website a list of failures. So there's not a guaranteed way to know that it's going to work. I think a telltale sign is that you're willing to try it again. But let me just say, like, look, you're going to do a lot of things and they're going to feel right, they're going to look right, and it's just not going to work. And I think that as long as you're willing to get up and try again, That's your first telltale sign. I think if I think there's this feeling. I'm not a big gambler, but I did spend a lot of time in Costa Rica during a time when sort of it was the birth of the online gambling phase. And so I've been around that a lot of like on the bookie side and on the gambler side. And I think that there's this feeling when you go all in, when you're making your last bet. So I would say in business, I don't think you ever want to feel like I have bet my last chip on this podcast or on this initiative. Because if you have and it doesn't work, then what am I going to do? I also think that especially for your younger listeners and for you, I love the fact that almost all business success comes from unproven people with an unproven product in an unproven marketplace. And so I think that that might be a telltale sign that you're going to go forward. And the difficulty is that our minds work and social media works against us because it tells us things like, look, I don't know when we'll air, but right now, uh, you can't go on social media, and your generation, your age group probably is thinking, look, TikTok shop. That's how I'm going to make all of my money. TikTok shop or being an influencer or whatever that is, right? The problem with that is that now we're already in basically a proven vehicle in a proven market. And so now we're chasing, we're running after something.
I love that.
I want to remind people that Amazon started out as a bookstore. You know, people were like, "Who's going to buy books online with an unproven person?" Nobody knew who Jeff Bezos was, right? An unproven person. You have the famous pictures of the door as his desk in an unproven market, selling books online, an unproven product. Think about all of your favorite businesses that you admire. That is the formula: unproven people with an unproven product in an unproven market. If that's you, well, I'd like to bet on that.
Yeah, so with that frame of mind, do you think that doubt is something that you see very commonly among business people?
Course. And that's the other thing that's really difficult, right? Because even all of the guests that come on and look, I want to be super transparent. I love that because that's part of even what I do. So every person that sells consulting, part of the marketing is to plant seeds of doubt. But I always say this, Elon. I tell people when you work with me, what I need for you to understand is that all of the world's best coaching advice is always counterintuitive. If you understood that, then you could really advance yourself because what we tend to look for are things that feel good, that are in alignment, that, oh yeah, that makes sense, right? When we say that, oh yeah, that makes sense. What I want is that doesn't make sense. How do I make it make sense in my business? Because your intuition has brought you here. If you want to go to the next level, and that's what people that begin to look and say, I need help, I need something. The first step is saying, well, my intuition has brought me here, and here's not that bad, but I'm looking to go there. But I can't go there with what has gotten me here, and that's my intuition. Most people don't have formal training in entrepreneurship, and so it's intuitive, and so intuition is what will take you to that next level. But don't let social media and the gurus plant those seeds of doubt.
Yeah. Wow. Sean, that was amazing. I loved every second of that. It makes me think like, you talk to so many businesses. I wonder if because you're talking about you have to try many times, you have to get up. If the right thing feels naturally easier or it's more of a push. Like, do you think that businesses that make it find something and they kind of push it into existence, or it feels obviously it's not linear, kind of like we talked about, but it seems maybe a little bit easier to get out there than other ideas they had previously?
Yeah, so you have the mindset side of it and the actual physical side of it. On the mindset side, it feels easy because it's in alignment, right? So you find these things, this project that's in alignment. On the physical side, it's extremely hard. You have to push, and that's where you get challenged. You do get down, to where, financially your bank account's on fumes. You're trying to wear 30 million hats. You're trying to do all the things. You're out there marketing, you are on fumes. That's the hard part because Same thing, every great idea, every great success story always has that's that, up and down, always has lows. There's never a story of, I mean, and I guarantee you, anybody that you've interviewed on this podcast, nobody's ever been like, yeah, I graduated college, I had this idea, and like the next day I was pretty much a multimillionaire. That's never how it happens.
Yeah.
And so the actual work part of it is always going to test you. The ease of it is in the alignment. Like you're like, I'm just so passionate about my podcast, about my clinic, about my whatever it is that you're putting out there, and it feels in alignment. That's what actually allows you to keep going when things are difficult.
So as far as the, I guess we can say, threshold between trusting yourself and having somebody like you who's a consultant help give you unconventional advice, what do you think that looks like? Because I think a part of it is I talk to so many amazing people like you on the show, Sean. So it's like for me, I have some type of vision, right? I want to stick to what I know, but I'm very aware that I can't possibly know everything. So what do you think is a good, like, out of 100%, you think it's 50-50? You think it's like less of me trying to push my ego and my vision and more somebody who's experienced, or how do you think that works?
You mean the relationship dynamic between somebody that's
Yeah.
hungry and a guide? Well, I have lots to say on that. First of all, there's a huge difference between a coach and a mentor. A coach is somebody that is guiding, right, the plays on the field. And one thing that a lot of times people get really wrong is that a coach doesn't have to have done the thing. Most great coaches in sports weren't very good in the sport that they're coaching. And definitely, it's few and far between that a coach that's coaching on the sidelines won a championship as a player. It's not that common. But what they have is a great mind. They see the game and they understand it. Also, by the way, most championship level players would make terrible coaches, right? So, and we've seen that where players have attempted to move into the coaching space and frankly don't do that well. A mentor is somebody who has been there and done that, but they're not giving you, strategy and tactics on the ground. They can give you situational awareness because they've been there before. But it is few and far between, but it is possible that you can find a person that is a great coach and a mentor. So I think that's number one. Let's understand, do you need a coach or do you need a mentor, right? Coach calls a play and you're like, hey, give me the play. I'll run out there on the field because I see my role here more like a quarterback. You call the play in, I'll execute on the play. Or do I need a mentor? Even coaches would have a mentor and they would say things like, when I was in this situation, like let's say that you grew, and I might even just say, I mean, again, not knowing any details, maybe in an early stage, you might need a coach. Maybe though you've built your business and you're like, look, I'm looking to exit. At that point, you might need a mentor, right? Someone that's
Interesting.
like, listen, these are the things you're going to see. So I think that's number one. And relative to like what role they're playing, I think would stem out of whether it's they're occupying a coaching or a mentor role. But I think the reason why somebody would do this, and especially someone in your shoes, the reason why someone would even explore this conversation is because of the term leverage. So leverage just helps you to get to your destination faster. So you're 21, you're in great shape. I am 54. So if you and I were to run a 400-meter foot race on foot, who would win?
Maybe me.
You would definitely win. But what if you had to run and I was on a bicycle? Then who would win?
Yeah, you for sure.
Now, and that's just simply because the bicycle has gained me leverage.
Yeah.
It's a tool that will help me to get there faster. So many times coaching and mentorship can and should be used as leverage to help you to arrive at your destination faster. And so, what percentage of it? I don't know. What percentage of it is like me and my physicalness versus the bicycle? I mean, because I
Hmm.
have a bicycle, even if you were a world class athlete, I'm probably still going to beat you because the bicycle provides such tremendous leverage. Now, if we switch it and I'm on a motorcycle, well, you have no chance, right? Because there's just so much leverage. And so I think that part of too what you're looking for, and not just in coaching and mentorship, but in all elements of growing this business, is you're looking for leverage points that will just simply accelerate you. I mean, Elon, I have no doubt if you haven't done so already, you are definitely, and same thing goes for every single one of the listeners today, you are going to make $1 million. I have no doubt about that. But the question is it going to take you, are you going to make $1,000 a year for 100 years? Are you going to make it by making 100,000 a year for 10 years? Or are you going to make $1 million in the next 6 months? And so the answer to that question is all leverage, right? We want to just get you to that point faster. And then the lastly, my great friend David Meltzer always says the fastest way to get anywhere is to find somebody who's already standing in the spot where you want to be and ask them for directions.
Mm, I love that. Sean, I will say I feel like recently I've been a little dehydrated, so I've been cramping. So I think maybe you would beat me in the foot race. It really, I think it depends. If I'm
Oh,
hydrated, if I stretch a little bit before, but
then you
um,
got me.
I love the idea of leverage. I think it's absolutely huge for people listening to this. And I do have a younger skewing audience, so it's great that you're giving these pieces of advice. I know they're going to find this very valuable. But how can people learn to find the leverage? I feel like sometimes people get very into what they're doing. You know, they're working in the business instead of on the business. So how could people take a step back and say, "Oh my God, I've had this here the whole time. Why didn't I utilize it?"
Well, I think a lot of times when we're working in the business, we become very short sighted because we're looking at maybe we have a task list and we're working to check off those tasks. In order to find leverage, we have to become long sighted. And so, I mean, that same example, let's say that I'm in Naples, Florida, and I'm like, man, I would love to get up and see Elon in the Chicago area. So I go onto Google Maps and I type it in, and right there on Google Maps, it will say like walking, uh, car. And so I click on car because that, I know I want to go to Chicago, and I click on car and it says, I don't know, price is like 36 hours probably. And I'm looking at this and I'm like, wow, gosh, that seems like no, I wouldn't say 36, but it's probably 24. Like, wow, that seems like a long time to get there. But if I start to say, well, look, let's just get to Tampa, then let's get to Georgia, and I begin to task it out, it'll still take me the same 24, 36 hours. But if I focused on Chicago and I was like, well, I really want to get to Chicago, what other ways exist for me to get there? And so if I'm long sighted and I understand I'm trying to go to Chicago, I would maybe entertain a train. Maybe I would look to fly, right? And so now, because if I'm stuck on drive, and that's what happens, right? I'm going to drive and I just want to drive there faster. What if I don't sleep? What if I take the Tesla and it's in self-driving mode? No, 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 no. You've got to decide and be open-minded enough to look at alternative vehicles to arrive without losing sight of me wanting to go to Chicago, which is another thing that happens because sometimes people find leverage, but they end up in Omaha and they're like, what the heck? And so it's easy also to lose sight of the ultimate destination, what you're trying to build and what the goal is.
Yeah, where do you think most service-based businesses, in your experience, are lacking leverage and don't see it?
Well, that's interesting because I think that, to your point, I think it is actually in coaching and mentorship. The reason is because, and this is really interesting. And if it's not an indictment on the the university system. I know that you're studying. I mean, look, there are certain things that as a doctor, I have to go to school and I had to get a license. But what people lose sight of is that during that process, the educational system has a goal of equipping you to perform, especially in the service world. I'm going to teach you how to be a great accountant. I'm going to teach you how to be a great attorney. I'm going to teach you how to be a great doctor, but I'm not going to teach you the business side of it. And everybody gets really upset. They're like, well, nobody ever taught me that. And, I have a lot of experience in higher education. And I always remind people that, listen, but that wasn't their charge. Their charge was to equip you to do the job and to make sure that you'd be able to get your license. And so because of that, in the service world, because we're so focused on the thing that we are trying to do, we get really good at doing the thing. We become oftentimes negligent or neglectful in the business. And ultimately, I always tell people, but you're not going to be able to do the thing to help the people that you were put on the planet to serve if ultimately you can't pay the rent, you can't pay the bills, and you can't stay open. And so in the service space, I think, the number one leverage is getting some guidance on the business side. you're probably fantastic on the doing the thing side. But on the business side, that will help to really accelerate you through and help you to arrive at your goals faster.
That's beautiful. I know one of the things that you talk about is the idea of building relationships over campaigns. You say community over campaigns, which I think is very interesting. When you talk about service-based businesses, how do you establish a relationship plan without making it come off as transactional?
Well, that's super simple. I mean, but I'll go deeper for for you. But the everybody says, for example, when I teach sales, like, well, how do you do sales without it coming off as sleazy? To which, I always say, well, are you sleazy? I mean, if you're sleazy, it's going to come off as sleazy, but if you're not sleazy, it's not going to come off as sleazy. How do I execute in a relationship realm without it coming off as transactional? Well, are you transactional? And that's a hard question to ask because again, um some counterintuitive advice here is that most of the relationship things that we are exposed to are transactional, networking group, networking events, and you go to the event, and people say like, "Hey, so what do you do?" And maybe we'll even come back to that question because at the core, that's such a weird question to ask. That sets the tone that it is transactional. So we're taught a lot of things, and people tell you like, well, okay, well, Elon, what's your elevator pitch? Well, that is transactional, right? And so don't be transactional. But beyond that, I think that it's like having a friend. If you are becoming my friend because you heard that I have tickets to the Masters, well, it won't take long for me to figure out that that's who you are and what you're doing. But if you're my friend because you're my friend, well, then it also won't take long before it just becomes a reality that I'm like, Elon, I have tickets to the Masters. Would you like to go? Because we're friends, right? So it's the same outcome. It just depends on how you approach it. And so I think that having a plan for who I want to meet, who I want to be in relationship with, and what I want the ultimate outcome to be is not transactional. It's the way that I go about that which becomes transactional. But it's like I mean, you're walking around this afternoon on campus and you see a really pretty girl. I mean, maybe in your mind you're like, "Wow, I would like to meet her," but she's in passing. And so that then starts the process. So now you're like, "Okay, well, I'd like to kind of figure out where she goes, who she talks to. Oh, I realize that she talks to one of my friends." That's how relationships are. But what happens is we just kind of in business do it kind of haphazardly. And every time that we create a new relationship, we immediately go to selling. Would you like to do business with me? Versus let me get to know you. And on the backside, once the relationship is deeper, sure, there will be plenty of benefits. All of your real friendships have benefits, but that doesn't make them transactional. You're in the relationship for the person, for the relationship. And the same applies in business.
Yeah. Oh my God, Sean, I could talk about this topic forever. So I wrote a book. It's called Talk Deeper. It's all about relationships. The subtitle is How to Turn Everyday Conversations into Life-Changing Connections. As somebody who's had a lot of really cool episodes with really cool guests, it's become apparent to me that the world values transactions more than anything else. It's like, okay, what can I do? How can I get something from it? And because of this book, I've been uploading like short form content and I've had people DM me. And something similar that you were talking about was like in sales, you were saying, are you sleazy? Right. So this one guy texted me and he was like, hey, like I have a problem where people like think I'm like being transactional, whatever. And I was like, okay, where does this happen? He's like, yeah, when I'm doing high ticket sales. And I'm like, and then he was telling me, he's like, all I want to do is make a lot of money. And I'm like, yeah, well, when you do these kinds of things, one of the things I talk about in my book that I really believe in is your intentions are very clear, no matter whether or not you tell people or not, right? Kind of what you talked about. So I told him, I'm like, if you're doing this for money, people are going to know without you having to tell them. So kind of similarly, you talking about the idea of relationships is so powerful because I totally attest to this whole idea that meaningful relationships not only are extremely underappreciated, but they can get people so far in life. Like I've had so many experiences where, you know, when I have a podcast guest on, I want to help them as much as possible. Like I benefit from just being able to speak with you. My audience benefits because they get to hear you speak, and you get benefited because I'm talking about yourself. I'm promoting you, and like I love doing it. Right? It's like if I really believe in my guest, I think I'm doing them like a big a big favor, and I love it at the same time, right? So I think that's something that I wish more people understood, this whole idea that ironically, the less transactional you are, the more things you end up getting.
100%. Absolutely. One of the things too, just real quick is, inside of that, and I love the concept of just approaching everything on a deeper level. I think that we're kind of programmed to be very superficial in a lot of what we do in business. You could apply that to marketing, sales, client interactions. But yes, in the realm of relationships, I think that that idea of really getting deep into the weeds, if you will, and leading with giving, because you can't get unless you've led with giving. Otherwise, yes, that's another thing, the telltale sign that it's transactional. But also in the realm of getting deeper, and you said like the world is transactional. I would challenge that in a little bit, but I would definitely say the United States is transactional.
Interesting.
The United States is one of the few places, like if you travel the world, most other countries don't lead when somebody meets you. They don't lead with, "What do you do?"
Yeah.
But the United States does, which is very interesting because that's so much part of our identity, right? Like leading, like before I even know anything about you, I just want to know what you do. And that's because I'm starting this off on a transactional foot. That's why those networking meetings are highly transactional. And that's why we get caught in that wave, because it's all about what we do and there's nothing about who you are. So I would even say, like, one, get to know yourself. Who are you? And then go out in the world and get to know people deeper, so that even if they're like, "Well, I'm an accountant," be like, "Well, I mean, it doesn't matter to me what you do. I'm more interested in who you are." That begins to set a tone for, this is not just going to be transactional. We can get to what you do later, but let's just figure out who each other is. Like, who are we? And where can we mutually benefit each other as who we are, versus how can we mutually benefit each other for what we do? Because that's super superficial. You could change what you do tomorrow. You could tomorrow decide you wanted to construct houses, but that wouldn't fundamentally change who you are. And so that's one of the things that I think is interesting about the United States.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic. And I think it goes back to exactly what you were talking about with people. Well, first of all, being able to change their identity, but um, I guess us being transactional as the US. Shifting gears a little bit, I know you talk a lot about raising prices, being more of a, I guess, premium price. For those service-based businesses that you're working with, how do you have that conversation with them about raising prices when they might feel a little bit guilty about it?
That's a phenomenal question, and it applies, I think, in all industries, because very few people. It's a very small percentage of people who operate in a high volume, very low margin, cutthroat, transactionally based industry. Most of the people that I encounter, that I speak to, really do believe that whatever the thing is that they're selling, whether it's a service, a product, the thing that they have, that, dry shampoo or, acupuncture treatment, they believe that that can literally change the world. Just if more people knew about it. That's always what they say. Just if more people knew about this could literally change the world. And if you believe that, I always hear people, and when I'm talking to people, I'm like, wow, what is it? Oh, it's an all organic, natural dry shampoo. And sometimes I'm like, how can that possibly change the world? But I know that they believe it. And I'm not talking about anything in particular, but I know that the person believes it. But if you really believe that, how could you just charge like nothing for it? Like if this dry shampoo is going to change the world, I mean, and also when I'm hearing it outside of like a dressed up marketing pitch, I'm like, wow, what is this dry shampoo? And then you tell me this is this dry shampoo, and I'm like, well, how much is it? And you're like, it's $4.99. Well, right away in my mind, because you had built this up so high, I automatically fall into this. Well, what's wrong with it? Is this some
Mm.
dry shampoo off of Temu? Like, where'd you get this? Like, what do you mean it's $4.99? Now, if you told me this dry shampoo is the greatest thing in the world, and I was like, how much is it? And you're like, look, it's a little bit more expensive than what you're used to, but still, it's only $75 for a bottle. I'd still be like, wow, that's expensive. But I would be like, why? It must be good. And so I think that part of this is asking yourself and being real honest, like, do I really think that this thing can change the world? Because if you're just selling, some widget that you're like, no, no, this is like a fancy paperclip, but look, we just sell them because I'm not really, no, it's not going to change the world, but people need it, then we're in a different pricing model. But if you're like, yeah, this thing is like this is the next thing, Shawn, then I would encourage you and advise you even that you've got to be careful that you don't get priced too low. Now, if if your thing exists, if there's a market for your thing, there's really only two pricing options, and that's to be the lowest option in that particular market because people are shopping for a bargain, or amongst the highest because nobody ever buys in the middle.
Hmm.
You don't ever say like, well, I'd like to get a new laptop. And you're like, well, let me just go online and get the average price one. Either you're like budget conscious and so you're shopping, or you're like, I need the best one. So you didn't care how much it cost. You went inside that upper echelon. And so typically it's safer to perform in that higher price range.
Shawn, dude, you are absolutely awesome. Let the audience know where people can find you, links, any shout outs you want to give.
Well, first of all, shout out to you because look, how cool is it that you look at the list of guests, and I also think it's a great testament to you. How cool is it that you're following a vision, following a dream, and you're making it come true. Two, look at the people that you've had on your podcast. That's a testament to everybody who's listening that, man, you got to make an ask. You've got to figure out what you want and then you got to ask for it. Like so many of us are shy. Like, oh, I don't want to ask this person to help me or be on my podcast or speak at my event or whatever. Yeah, I think you're a testament to just stepping out and asking. So shout out to you. You can all find me at Adaptopreneur. One of my things is that health and wellness depends on our body's ability to adapt to its environment, both internal and external. And I do a ton of work in the health and wellness space. But success in business depends entirely on your business and its ability to adapt to its environment, both internal and external, constantly changing environment. I teach that in Adaptable Entrepreneur, but the website is www.adaptopreneur.com. Shoot me an email, Shawn@adaptopreneur.com. Be bold enough to ask a question, and I'll be bold enough to answer you.
Shawn, thank you for coming on the show. To all my listeners, I will see you guys next Tuesday. Thank you for listening.